Hello, welcome to Geeking Out with Shad. I want to talk about driving in the winter with an EV and kind of some of the weird nuances and stuff that is very different from driving an ICE vehicle in the winter. For starters, both EVs and ICE vehicles, and if you don't know what ICE is, that's internal combustion engine or gas powered cars, right? If you do a lot of short trips, they're not very efficient in the wintertime. And the reason is because short trips, you start the vehicle up and it's cold and everything has to warm up. All the systems have to warm up. The heat has to warm up. In an ICE vehicle, a lot of people, what they do is they start their car. They even have automatic starters on a lot of them, and they let it sit there and idle for a long time and then get the car all warmed up before they get in it. You can also do that with this car, with an EV. I can get it all warmed up before I get in it, but I usually don't. And I'll tell you why in a second. But what ends up happening is, because you have to get everything warmed up every time you start it, that takes a lot of energy. In an EV, it's battery, and in an ICE vehicle, it's gas, right? So if you're doing short trips, so let's just say you start up your car and then you drive like 6 miles, right? Maybe your work is close, right? My work is, well, I can actually tell you right now, my work is 12.4 miles, right? If you do that, then I shut the car off, I go work for 8-ish hours, I come back out, my car's cold again. If you look at my dash, it is 6 degrees right now, right? So it'll be a little bit warmer later today, but this is the morning, so it's 6 degrees. So what ends up happening is you do a lot of shorter trips, and each time you start the vehicle, you have to warm it up, and that uses a lot of energy. So in an EV, what's interesting is your range, if you're doing a lot of short trips, gets significantly reduced, right? So you might be, depending on whether your car has a heat pump or not, right? In these kind of cold temperatures, you might be getting only, a car that normally gets 250 miles of range, you might be only getting 120 miles of range, right? Well, that's because of all these startups and everything, the battery, the interior, all the stuff, all the systems having to heat up every time you start the car. What's kind of interesting on that is, on the flip side, if you were to go on a longer trip, and actually my trip to work is long enough for me to offset that initial startup. So it just went down because I'm sitting here with the heat on and the car's running, but it was at 2.1. And if I was to continue driving, let's just say I was on a road trip or whatever, that would continue to climb. And so it's interesting is, on a longer trip in colder weather, I don't take much of a range hit. So I'd probably get close to 200 miles of range on the highway or something like that in the winter, which in the summer I get like 220, right? So and that's highway driving. City driving, in the summer I get well over 300 miles of range, stop and go using regen and all that. In the wintertime, it varies on the temperature, and usually when I'm driving in the city, I'm doing what I mentioned earlier. I'm doing short trips, leaving the car parked, starting at short trips. So it's an interesting thing to think about, right? So if you have an EV and you're driving it in the cold temps and you're getting really bad range, it's likely because of all these short trips and having to make the car warm up every time you start it, right? But be rest assured, if you were to go on a longer trip with your EV, you would get much better range, because the car only has to do that initial warm up once. And if you are plugged in when in the morning, like at home or something, do that warm up while you're still plugged in, right? Or if you have a heated garage or something, that's even better, right? But yeah, you only have to do that once, then you're driving, and then the car, all it has to do is maintain its temperature, which takes a little bit more energy, but it's not as extensive as the startup, right? Okay, I did say I was going to come back to why I don't preheat up the car before I go drive it, and that's because I don't really have to. Like, the thing that's nice about EVs is they just drive normal. Like, if you start up a ICE vehicle when it's cold, it like makes all these gnarly noises, and then when the engine does kick in, it's like, and it runs super rough. It takes a long time for that car to warm up, and if you go to drive it right away, it doesn't quite drive right because, you know, the engine's not quite warm, and the steering wheels can sometimes be tight because the steering power steering pump has to warm up, stuff like that, right? So usually people want to warm their cars up and let the idle come down and let it, you know, start functioning normal. With an EV, you just get in it and start driving it, and it drives like it always does. It doesn't have to go through that like warm-up phase for things to start working properly. It just works, right? And steering works, motors, or everything works as if it's thing. The only thing is it's cold in the cabin. Well, the awesome thing about that is it literally takes like 30 seconds or so for the heat to start pouring out of the vents. Like, it doesn't take long for heat to start pouring out. Again, in an ICE vehicle, it could take 5 minutes or so. Actually, when I've done this very trip, when I had a Toyota Tacoma, I would start it up, and I usually would just, you know, give it that initial warm up, let the idle kick down there, and start driving it. By the time I got here, just over 12 miles, it was just starting to get toasty warm inside. Like, it was cold pretty much most of my drive here. This car, it starts warming up within 30 seconds, and literally within 2 minutes, it's like nice and cozy, and I turn on the heated seats and the heated steering wheel and stuff like that. So EVs are actually pretty awesome in the winter time. I know there's all this disinformation. Oh, they don't work in the winter, they don't work in the cold, they don't charge, and all of that is false. So there you have it, a little update. Just know, and even in an internal combustion engine car, lots of little short trips where the car cools off and you got to reheat it every time. I remember with my Tacoma, when I was doing short trips with it like that, I was getting like 11 to 12 miles per gallon. And normally in the summertime, I mean, was a truck, so it didn't get great gas mileage to begin with, but it would get like 17, 18, right? So yeah, it saps energy when you're doing all these short trips in both an EV and a gas-powered vehicle. So there you have it. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.